to see it yet?
Yes, I see it now.
Great.
Every day we tell each other that this day will be the last, and tomorrow we all can go home free, and all this will finally end. Palestine, tomorrow will be free. Palestine, tomorrow will be free.
Exit full screen. Exit. Where is that? Just wait here. It's taking a few minutes.
No mother, no father to wipe away my tears. That's why I will cry. I feel scared, but I won't show my fears. I keep my head high, deep in my heart. I'll never have any doubt that Palestine tomorrow will be free. Palestine, tomorrow will be free.
Okay. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Let me stop the share. And welcome, lovers of freedom and peace and hope. That we insist on hoping. We insist on hoping. And that's why we have to keep speaking out. We insist on hoping. Stubborn hope. No matter what's happening, we're going to continue hoping. So let me turn off the, I think I have another YouTube thing coming on. Hold on, let me see if I can turn it off. Yeah. There's so many lovely videos about Palestine. I've really enjoyed doing this program for everyone because I've learned so much and I've seen so many beautiful videos. So what I try to do is start out each program with some kind of musical inspiration, and then we end with something artistic and inspiring, because the facts and the realities can be very depressing for all of us, as you know. So we are privileged to have Naomi Foyle to discuss her work with Palestinian poets, and we have Kelvin from Amman who's going to read his poem. And Diane, I'm happy to meet you and thank you for joining us. And Huda, hi, welcome. And Eugene, and let's see who else is here. We have Sarah. Hey, hi, Sarah. My buddy from New York and Beatrice, and Farid. Oh, this is great. Well, the peeps, we're all here. The gang is all here. This is lovely. So to begin with, besides I have to shoot my dogs with water to get them to stop barking, I want to Naomi. If you don't know Naomi's background, it's pretty impressive. She's written many, many books. I posted from Wikipedia. She has quite a impressive entry on Wikipedia. It took me a long time to copy and paste it.
I confess that I wrote it myself.
You wrote it yourself, right? The best way. But she's an extraordinarily gifted person. And I didn't know you were also Canadian.
Yes.
news to me. And she's published many books and won awards and great international recognition. But for our purposes, why we love her particularly is that she discovered Palestinian poetry. When I went to Jordan, one of the things I most loved, oh, yes, and there's a Blade of Grass, a collection of books of Palestinian poetry, and that's Fareed Bitar, my dear friend, is in it. But I just wanted to say one thing about poetry and Palestinian culture and Arab culture. What really is something we don't get in the West is how important poetry is in Arab culture and the spoken word, which is really music. It may be spoken, but it's the language is so musical. And how I learned that was kind of in a very fun way. I had a wonderful friend, Hilda Hiati, a very famous Jordanian female artist, who invited me to all of her parties with her artist friends. And if you know artists in Jordan, they like to party. and I went to this one fabulous party thrown by an Iraqi refugee poet where they imported some fish from Iraq, from the Tigris River, that they prepared a certain way. And they bought a lot of arak. Those of you who don't know, arak is sort of like an anisette. It's a liquor. This came from Lebanon. It's made of flowers. And it's a kind of an anisette tasting liquor. And this was a very special bottle of arak. And as they were passing it around, everybody, before you could get a drink of it, you had to read your poem. And everybody whipped out, all the other people there. I was the only American there, as usual. Everybody whipped out from their pocket their poem. Like people carried their poetry, and everybody read this marvelous poem, and everybody's everybody's so excited about the poem. Then they came to me, and what poem did I have? And I'm like, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest. So then I started writing poetry, and I always had a poem with me whenever I met my Jordanian friends. But poetry is such a rich, important part. It's the heart of Arab culture, is poetry. It's the heart of Arab culture. So it's more than just poetry. It's not just words. It's the heart, the beating heart. So Naomi, how did you find out about poetry in Palestine?
Well, I had become involved in Palestinian activism, which was how it started, really. But, being a poet, I felt that I needed to make my activism centered in who I was and in my work. So I started a group called British Writers in Support of Palestine, of which Diane and Frankie are both members. And we campaigned for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, in particular, the cultural and academic boycott of Israel. And at the time, we ran quite a few letter writing campaigns. And then we were superseded by Artists for Palestine UK, which became an umbrella group that, more than writers, all kinds of artists. So we're kind of an archive organization now, BWIS. But then I was also asked to edit an anthology of Palestinian poetry by Andy Croft, the publisher at Smokestack Books, because he basically knew of my, my interest and my work around the activism. So I said, yes, I can do it. I had to schedule it in, and it took a couple of years, a year longer than I thought because I was ill, but it was the first thing I did after I recovered from cancer, actually. And I was very proud to spend that autumn of 2017 working with Fareed and the other poets, and also Wali Bazoun, who's an Iraqi poet at my university, who helped with some of the translation. Initially, I had thought that this book would be Palestinian poems in Arabic, translated into English, and I wouldn't have to worry about the Arabic because all I would do is edit, because these would be poems that were already published, and I would just edit the translations. Well, I very soon, almost immediately realized that was very naive. Someone like Fareed would be writing to me in English and Arabic, and people were sending me poems in both languages, and also people were sending me poems in English who didn't speak Arabic. And I realized this collection had to be true to the diaspora. It had to be true to everyone who is Palestinian, no matter where they're born, where they live, what language they speak. So I assembled a small team of co-editors, sort of an editorial board, who vetted, the dual translations back and forth. So we ended up, for example, taking poems written in English and having them translated into Arabic. So Fadi Judah's poems, for example, Farid worked with Mona Azar in Ramallah on some of his poems, getting the colloquialisms, because this, there's incredible questions around Arabic. Farid will obviously want to talk to this, but what I feel is, it's another one of the thefts, isn't it? It's the theft of the language and the theft of the living language. You have a language that you remember as a child, and obviously languages evolve. So I hope in the end that this anthology, A Blade of Grass, really is representative. There's established voices here. There's the great Mahmoud Darwish, new translations. There are young poets. There are poets in Palestine who were established in Palestine. Poets from America, people living in Egypt, people living in, a young woman living in Australia. So in the end, yeah, I think it is representative, and though it's not comprehensive. How could it possibly be comprehensive? It's a taster. And I feel that the world is still waiting for a really comprehensive anthology of Palestinian poetry translated into English and back and forth. I think it's probably been about 20 years since there has been one in America. And that would certainly need a bilingual editor or a team of editors who are bilingual between them. I'd like to read a poem. I'd like to read some poems from the collection, and I'd like to start with "Resist My People, Resist Them," because this will pick up on your themes of last week. And thank you very much, Jackie, for inviting me. Thank you for running this series. It's going to be a weekly series. Every month there will be, or the first Sunday will be dedicated to poetry, but there will also be meetings on the political situation and on other arts in Palestine. So a couple of weeks ago, when I came for the first poetry, we were talking about political prisoners, and Farid was speaking about political prisoners and about poets in prison. So this is "Resist My People, Resist Them," for which Dareen Tator spent basically 3 years under, house arrest or in jail. And I'll read the poem first, and then I'll explain the charges against it. So just to let you know, Dareen Tator is a Palestinian living in 48 in the state of Israel. She lives in North Israel, Galilee. Resist my people, resist them. Resist my people, resist them. In Jerusalem, I dressed my wounds and breathed my sorrows, and carried the soul in my palm for an Arab Palestine. I will not succumb to the peaceful solution. Never lower my flags until I evict them from my land. I cast them aside for a coming time. Resist my people, resist them. Resist the settlers' robbery and follow the caravan of martyrs. Shred the disgraceful constitution which imposed degradation and humiliation and deterred us from restoring justice. They burned blameless children. As for Hadil, they sniped her in public, killed her in broad daylight. Resist my people, resist them. Resist the colonialist onslaught. Pay no mind to his agents among us who chain us with the peaceful illusion. Do not fear doubtful tongues. The truth in your heart is stronger, as long as you resist in a land that has lived through raids and victory. So Ali called from his grave. Resist my rebellious people. Write me as prose on the agar wood. My remains have you as a response. Resist my people, resist them. resist my people, resist them. And that translation is by Tariq al-Hidar. So where the prosecution rested its case in this poem, the charges were incitement to violence, and it should be said that there are many, countless examples of Jewish Israelis making comments on Facebook threads, on Twitter. There are definitely incitements to violence, and they have never ever been charged with it. So this poem is said to be inciting Palestinians to violence, and that was because of the line, "Follow the caravan of martyrs." Now, when this poem was translated into Hebrew, the word shahidim was used, which for most Jewish Israelis will automatically mean terrorist. But the argument is, of course, that the word is martyr, and that word in English, we know, has a very ambiguous, complex meaning, because it also means victims. And if we actually then want to read this poem and decide, where is the poet standing on this, we see that the three people who are mentioned by name in the poem are all victims. They're all children who have been killed by settlers or by the IDF, children burned alive by settlers, for example. So I think we can tell that this poem is, it's a passionate response, and it's certainly a rebellious and a revolutionary response. But we can also see that actually it's also criticizing the Palestinian leadership in terms of the disgraceful constitution and this idea of the peaceful illusion. Peaceful is in quote marks, so is it against peace, or is it against what's purported to be peace? So these were the arguments that the defense were making, but of course, these were deaf. The judge was deaf to these arguments. So the Hebrew word that could have been and should have been used, arguably, is halal, which means just martyr, and has those meanings, both of those meanings that are then present in the poem, and which can inform your reading of it. So Doreen, with her incarceration, it's not the first poet at all that Israel has imprisoned, but at the time she put Israel in the company of Saudi Arabia, where another Palestinian poet in the anthology, Ashraf Fayyad, is still serving a sentence for apostasy, for renouncing Islam, though I think when I've read his poems in translation, it seems quite clear that what he's doing is criticizing the monarchy, and the inequality in the country and the pollution in the country. There's quite an environmentalist quality to his work. So the poems that we have translated in the book, which I translated with Walid al-Bazoun, were written while he was in jail. And his story of, I think we probably will have heard of Ashraf. He was going to be beheaded at first. When his father heard the news, he collapsed and died of a heart attack. So his son was not able to see him, was not able to go to his funeral, and carried the guilt of that. And then there was an international outcry, and his sentence was commuted to, I think, 800 lashes. So far, I believe he's not been lashed, but neither has his appeal been heard, or his sentence reduced again. So he's still languishing in a Saudi jail. And I heard the poems are very they're very moving, because he is absolutely, it seems, at rock bottom of the soul. But I have heard that his spirits are good now, and that at least the last I heard, his spirits were strong, and knowing that people remember him and read his poetry means a huge amount to him. Cracked skin. My country passed through here, wearing the freedom shoe. It went far away, leaving its shoe behind. It was running in a confused rhythm, like the beat of my heart which was running in another direction with no convincing reason. The freedom shoe was torn, old, and fake, like human values in all their dimensions. Everything left me behind and went away, including you, shoe is a confusing invention. It proves our ineligibility to live on this planet. It proves we belong to another place where we do not need to walk for long. Maybe its floor is paved with cheap, slippery ceramics. Problem is not with slipperiness, but with water. The problem of heat, broken glass, thorns, dry branches, sharp rocks. The shoe is not an ideal solution, but it satisfies certain of our purposes, exactly like the mind, like emotion. My emotion is dead since you left me last time. I cannot reach you since my imprisonment inside a cement box engraved with cold metal rods, since everyone forgot me, starting with my freedom, ending with my shoes, which suffer from an identity crisis. So I think what we see sometimes in Palestinian poetry is, it's so imbued with a sense of loss of the homeland, but then there's also a tension, and what I've, for some poets more than others, around the use of words like homeland, because after some time they can start to ring hollow. And the poet, I feel, Darwish famously went through a period where he wanted to write love poems. He was actually in love with an Israeli woman. So, in the book there are a variety of views. What I want to present is the narrative of Palestinian, the human story, and that is inevitably a diverse story. There are political poems, there are spoken word poems, if you like. There are poems about intimacy, sexuality, and then there is, I want to read Maya Abu al-Khayat's poem, Insight. And this is a poem in which she questions, in a way, what she's been taught to believe. She says when she reads this poem in Palestine, there's silence after it. And I was very glad to give it a place. It's called Insight. I co-translated it with Maya Abu al-Khayat. Insight. I am waiting for a brave martyr's daughter to stand up and scream, take your homeland and give me back my dad. The almond blossom knows its life is short, but the bud cracks and yawns, and only when it falls on the streets of the school does happiness bloom. All the minutes of silence cannot return one voice to life. I've lived a life filled with heroes and complete bastards. Now I can no longer distinguish between them. I have seen children who gave their parents to the homeland, but I have never seen a homeland that gave an orphan a father. I want everyone to live and no one to fall, not even my demons, not even your demons. Maybe if not one of us falls, we will all rise above this hell. So again, I think there is that question of the vacuum of the leadership, and it's why I still remain firmly committed to boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which is a grassroots movement, which has a commitment from countless grassroots organizations and the vast majority of Palestinian people, and it takes also its courage from South Africa, of course, and the knowledge that what's happening in Israel has been the foundation of an apartheid state. So I'd like to also, maybe I'll just read I'm going to read two poems of my own. A short poem from Adamantine, which is a collection of mine that came out in 2019, and thanks to Fareed, I was able to, and Jackie, I was able to launch it in New York at Westbeth Artist Center. I'd like to read, on the theme of martyrs, I'd like to read a poem called Indelible, which is in memory of Razan al-Najjar, who was shot in the Great March of Return. She was the young paramedic, 21 years old, in her white coat, out tending the wounded and shot and killed by the IDF in 2018, June 1st. Indelible, in memory of Razan al-Najjar. Her mother clutches the evidence. A white coat, no longer white, but rust red, blotched, like the hide of a gazelle, discarded by drunken poachers after slaughtering the herd. As cameras circle, news feeds buzz. This woman's grief points like a finger to a truth beyond proof. Its red crescent still just visible. This vest is mercy's banner, sunset stained. And then I'd like to read a poem from this year. I think, like many of us, I was pretty sidetracked by the events of, last year, 2020. It still feels like 2020, doesn't it, with the pandemic and raging on. This is The Jewel, and it's for Beirut, the jewel of the Mediterranean. I visited Beirut in 2016, so after the explosion in August, I just had it pop up on my screen. I was, just sort of transfixed really by the news for those days, and the sorrow and the horror of that event. Jewel. Oh, I should say I was in Beirut because I was visiting refugee camps, Palestinian and Syrian refugee camps, thanks to the Muslim charity Interpal, who took me as a witness on a women's witness tour of the camps. The Jewel. For all its scarred chaos, crammed slums, the death trap of Sabra and Shatila, Beirut was beautiful. By night, clusters of amber bracelets, yellow diamond necklaces. By day, a jumble of honeycombs, its bisque balconies, dun gold apartments, climbing the hills in sun-warmed hives I wanted to sink my teeth into, my mouth a cradle for their bees. On the corniche, the Black Sea glittering beyond the balustrades, I thought the city's architects, as nowhere else, had understood something about us, our human proportions, desire for shifting symmetry, plant-like thirst for light. In Beirut, had given us a treasure so rare it was almost a mirage. The country was a fly tip. The government wouldn't even clean up the miles of garbage lining the roads, stinking mounds of split black bags, fly feasts of chicken bones, rotten fruit, foothills of dumped fridges, broken chairs. We drove past each day on our long, hot way to meet the people, warehoused in plastic tents in the mountains, driftwood shacks by the beach, bomb-shelled concrete blocks riddled with bullet holes and daubed with murals of keys. Our one night out in Beirut, walking to the fish restaurant along the corniche, a road cut into the edge of a cliff, especially one running along a coast. We must have passed near it. That 2,750-ton stash of ammonium nitrate, a white synthetic crystalline solid beloved of farmers, miners, and the IRA. Plant food and potential explosive, cheap fertilizer of fury and grief, which improperly stored becomes a rock of dynamite, combustive enough to marry a city. And I thank Rusted Radishes, the Beirut online and print journal, for publishing The Jewel.
Beautiful. Thank you, Naomi. That was a very powerful poem.
Yeah, they've been arrests now, haven't there, at least, though whether or not there'll actually be convictions is the next story. I know this is an open mic, so that's about 20 minutes. So, you know, I'm happy to read more if people want, but let's have the open mic or questions. Yeah.
Well, if anybody has questions, if anybody has questions,
I just want to say something. I'm so impressed with where you are coming from, Naomi. I really like. I really hope that the continuation of your participation also in discussions. I do feel that in some this voice should be heard as much as the blah 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 of the noise of illusions and media masks in order to make money by war industry of what is going on and all the rubbish that people regurgitate. I'm sorry to say that word.
Yeah.
Around in the mass psyche about this subject, because it plays on the fact, like Netanyahu going to the UN, it plays on the fact that most people in the world just don't have a clue until they hear something about it, then they take that on. And it like being aware that the people who think are not the people that are being addressed in the dialogue from the central powers. It's the masses, in order to just not have the resistance, to not have the understanding and the awareness of the common humanity. And this this view that you're expressing, it's interesting because anyway, I'd like to say that I feel it should be going out there. So like if you have links like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, things like that, I'd like to start to put a bit out, I mean, what little we can do. I feel we're running out of time. And I feel it's great to say, yes, we can, also the way that the media works. Like, for example, last month on Twitter, I saw a very, very interesting article. Most of the UN are not now supporting what Trump and Kushner's deal. Most of the countries in the UN are saying we don't acknowledge Jerusalem as being a Jewish capital. But this doesn't go out into the predominant media, which is controlled by the big tech companies and by those affiliated corporations. So there is hope, but it's some people waking up to what's going on. That's what I feel, and the people, the voices of the Palestinians coming across as, because the narrative is painted that they are like, these are throwing bombs, they're dangerous, they won't ever make a peace deal, they will never come to the table, so we'll carry on this massive military operation. And I think the voices that you're expressing is the really deep, the same as Farid, the really deep humanity, which is that anybody can identify with what you just spoke. Anybody on any side can identify with this. It's not names and labels, it's a human thing that you're describing. It's a human experience. I am so really impressed. Thank you very, very much.
Oh, well, thank you, though. It's, really, I'm just trying to be a kind of a vehicle or platform for the voices of the Palestinians. So it's to them, really, all the kind of gratitude goes for the dignity and the humanity with which they endure and withstand this. I mean, it's not only just it's more than the genocide and the theft is being blamed for it themselves, constantly blamed for it. So I do believe that poetry and politics have to work hand in hand. You can't, just the poetry is not enough. There has to be the collective action, and there has to be the analytical understanding. Yeah. But also there has to be the humanity, exactly as you say, to reach the hearts, and I think poetry can do that. I mean, Farid's poems about his childhood, they move me every time. I think, the history is not known. The history is forgotten, is erased. And when the people tell their history of being expelled from their own home, that recurs very often in a blade of grass. The stories, if not of themselves, of their parents being passed down. Those stories actually, they foreshadow what the great story of this century is, which is migration, and which is the refugee crisis. The Palestinians had a refugee crisis in 1948. So they've got a lot to teach us.
One of the things that we'll be doing next week, and Kelvin will be conducting the session, is to correct the idea that people had that there was nothing in Palestine before 1948. I recently, when I went to the doctor because I was having this, chest crisis pains, the doctor was a lovely young woman. She said, well, when I was telling her I was in Jordan and blah, 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 she said, well, there was nothing in that region before Israel came. And right now there would be nothing if Israel wasn't there. He said, where did you ever get that idea? I didn't even bother to debate her. I was having a chest palpitation at the time. I didn't need it before. So I would really have a total heart attack. So, but I'm going to send her a link to Kelvin. Kelvin is going to do a program next week discussing this false narrative that Palestine was an empty place with a barbaric culture, people just living in tents and no culture, no population, no nothing. So Kelvin is going to use his restored historic photographs to discuss what was there in Palestine before.
And also about the relationships between the people at that time, that we are painted this idea that there's always been opposition to Jews and they're always the victims, even in the Holy Land. And actually, the most elderly Jews that would say that the Arabs were our neighbors, and the same with the most elderly Palestinians. They would say, we don't have a problem with Jews, we have a problem with this insane Zionism. And that they used to be our neighbors and we used to do things together. And even people in the Galilee saying we were like family, Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And this part kind of gets blotted out and ignored, and it's almost like it is the solution somehow. But at the same time, like there's quite a vested interest in the whole way that the political mechanism is rigged, which is why I say yes, a political attitude, but at the same time, we have to step back from the political attitude and see where it's not working. And a little bit that time as a reflection that things can reflect.
Would you like to read some poetry for us?
Well, I don't know if I should, at any point in this series, if I should read my big poem or if I should read the shorter one. What do you think, Jackie? I just wanted to say that I got an email from, there's another poet called Naomi Nye. You might know of her.
Naomi Shihab Nye. She's in the book as well. Yeah.
Right. Well, I got a reply to my big poem. She was the first person I sent it to. Jackie was disappeared into her room here, and she just Jackie's amazing because she doesn't talk about what she does. She just does it. And she'll occasionally mention there's a technical issue, about this program or something, but then she'll just come out with phenomena. She's incredible. And she came out with a 3-part series about the history of Jerusalem through art. Because Netanyahu had just been to the UN and said, it's been our capital for 3,000 years, again, lies to the masses. And Jackie came out with the response to that. It's 3 hours of videos that every time you see them, you learn. And I realized that presence, that feeling of inspiration, like the Native Americans say, when people create, spirit comes to the earth, was what triggered me. Because I just started writing one night, everything that had happened, everything that was coming out, and it just happened. It was not me writing.
Kelvin, do you want to read your short poem for us?
Let me read the short poem, but I just would like to say what Naomi Nye said, and I hope at some point I'll get to read the big poem, but if not in a better mood than this also. She said, Viva, so much power and insight, wisdom and mighty truth trembling here in this very huge, wide, insightful, astonishing poem. Get it out there, share it anywhere you can. Thank you.
Well, we're going to do a program just on Jerusalem where I will show my videos. So maybe you could read your poem on that during that program.
I think it's about 23 minutes, 20, something like that, really. But I'll read. So after that, I realized that this was almost just something coming. I can't explain the experience of writing. I look back at it afterwards, I was like, you cannot calculate these kind of things. I'm sure you must have that feeling. Suddenly you start writing and you're like, oh yes, this picture and this picture. Hello, lady. And it's not something you can work out in your head. So these things just came from the first sentence to the end. Yeah. And you have to kind of steer them as you're going through and try and push them certain directions because certain things are important. You want perspective, you want balance, but that's not really something calculated.
When you read the poem,
There's two parts that I'd missed out and two subjects I'd missed out.
Kelvin, read it. We're running out of time.
So this was the last part that I felt I'd missed out from it, which didn't quite fit. So I wanted this to be a very important point to be included somehow, which is about the Dome of the Rock and the importance of the Dome of the Rock and the Hashemite custodianship of the Dome of the Rock, which really is somehow a central thing to the peace and stability of the region. Jordan has recently said, yes, we would accept a one-state solution if it really was a democracy, like you say you're bringing to the Middle East and everybody was equal and had an equal vote. But yeah, as long as it's not, we're not interested. So this is called Noble Sanctuary. It's dedicated to His Majesty King Abdullah II and the Hashemite custodianship of Jerusalem, of the holy places in Jerusalem, I'm sorry, which I feel is something very much to be preserved and spoken up for at this time. An angel came to me and said, come here and I will show you the bride that the Lamb has married. In the spirit, he took me to the top of an enormous high mountain and showed me Jerusalem, the holy city, coming down from God out of heaven. And it had all the radiant glory of God and glittered like some precious jewel of crystal clear diamond. Your friends, O Lord, make known the glorious splendor of your reign. King of Al Jazeera. His forefather, peace be upon him, went to heaven after the steed of lightning took him on a midnight moonlit flash from the rock of ages to the lands above the skies, in this place. Covered lovingly in gold by the last now of his children, guardians of the honor of brotherhood, he was chosen and under pressure, starved out, so to say. Yet still more concerned of the children of another's wars slammed between our midst. The division hides the blame for. Dollars deeply into multiple local varieties can be as empty and environmentally toxic as the paper they are printed on. Bestowed by men in ties and masks with tanks and conditions and F-35s. By those who refuse water to the children of the fig and the olive. By those who removed your brothers and their wives, children, and any who stood in the way. The desert sun can burn the blasphemous paper in a moment, but by prudently warming the ancient sunlight together in a shared and cooperative way, zakat above for my benefits, schools of learning, wisdom, and virtue above limousines and hotels, refugees in our hearts sitting atop the pillars of palace ornaments. The cradle can carry, protect, and nurture the orphan child. When his mother is safe, flourish and build a new future for all those to safely come from your diverse and fruitful, beautiful branches, truly of one tree. In the life of the blazing, life-giving sun, there are no walls in the desert. If it were mine to give, I'd award a peace prize for everyone who read and repeated and got it right. Brotherhood. And of the elephant in the room, it has to be seen for what it is, without walls, bare, people with children, no better, no worse. No difference between Isaac and Ishmael in the sight of Abraham. Yet more than confused by psychotic voices within those today's false spokesmen who are today the minority, who are truly the minority to blame. As men kept alive far too long in Washington's halls of abominable power, the same men, time after time, slip between and loaded seed the globalist greed. Look beneath and all you will see is the bitter isolation of selfishness, of the Ain and her decapitated pyramids of me-first greenbacks without spines, which do not stand for our prophet's revelations. Beyond the walls, we need to sit without those voices. Beyond the walls, we need to sit without those voices and see how we can encourage and invite the guidance of the prophet's progeny and offer the wisdom of a truly unified way of kindness and justice. A voice so clear and so uncorruptible for those with ears to see and eyes to see and ears to hear, beyond the cash registers of shopping malls and the polish of limousines and golden gifts honorable and true and unbreakable, worthy of 1,000 peace prizes. And the visit all await who knows that the Hadith tells of now's days, there is a war going on foretold. Mahdi has a strong sword of truth. Those who stand beside him, strong in responsibilities undertaken and carried out, made one by the hidden hands, one in surrender and trust and service. I say that again, so that's a bit mumbled. Those who stand beside him, strong in responsibilities undertaken and carried out, made one by the hidden hands, one in surrender and trust and service, against those who will accept bribes and promises and streams of riches never actually seen other than on a screen. Pending villas and green cards are not what God offers. Stairs all over the place, and none of them lead to eternity's gates, not one. Let not kin be divided, Al Jazeera of black fertile gold. Potential to seed for the children's children's children, until from the zeros, the same from any similar machine could type away children into passport numbers. Burn the pre-militarized contracts which divide and rule. For the nobility of the sanctuary is not measured in dollars. Your sacred lands of ancient sunlight, as endless yet undivided as they always have been, are not Greenwich's middle kingdoms as defined by a digital watch, which will not last long under the turnings of the searing desert sun, or have meaning if there is no rain. Each and every child and mother, through the ravages of wars, not ours, are all of our responsibility. Children of the cradle of an orphaned, run-a-right way civilization dependent on your wealth or wisdom, your inheritance, neither Darwin nor Ford knew what you do. Do not listen to the voices of jinns which run to define your corners of your rooms where you once were given by God to share the whole mansion. The self-orphan civilization, the orphan you gave birth to, the stories of wisdom and the libraries of Baghdad and Damascus and Alexandria and Acadia and Sumer has turned toxically amok with no roots to catch the rain-filled wisdom of the skies, with the roots of the saints and the blessed ones. You can lose your roots and become like them should you throw away the baby with the bathwater and not wash it as it were given this intellect to discern. Each in prayer can still choose to hear if we listen quietly inside and remember whose we are. The end. Eunice was gobbled up by God's whale, less than the unbelievers, and once allotted another chance. Seeing the sun, he missed what we all take for granted as a river of instruction, as life, as golden correction, ran to Nineveh, shouted from the rooftops, and all the people heard. Let us hear the voice of reason, of peace, of change, and of reconciliation that called him from the whale, and win this once and for all times to come.
Very powerful. Thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you very much.
A lot to think about. Fareed.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to just say a few things before I read my poem, and I promise I won't go on 30 minutes. I am very honored that I see Naomi. She truly is my, I don't know, we've traveled on this route, and I'm blessed to walk with her footsteps here and there. She honors me. She honors Palestine. She honors the refugees of 5 million and more. I'm truly, truly beyond words. And
thank you for encouraging me, Fareed, because, you know, it's always the case of the white savior, you know, trope, and I never ever wanted to step in those shoes. And walking with you, I feel like I don't, you know, I feel like I'm you're saving me, you know, you're giving me value in my life. So thank you for always your kind words whenever we're in public. Thank you.
I'm not just
So a lot of the Palestinian people are very grateful.
Let me speak. Please let me speak. Kelvin, you had your turn. Please, Please let me speak, otherwise I will just leave. Okay, I'm going to speak. I'm not wall, and then I'm going to read my poem. I'm sorry, I'm temperamental. I just want to say to Naomi, it's not about the Savior and Jackie as well. It's about that our voices have been spoken for 75 years. And you had mentioned something about an echo, and we lose our words and we keep repeating our words. I keep repeating my words for 40 years now. Mahmoud Darwish has repeated his words in 22 books. Many, many brilliant poets, Palestinians, have repeated their words, hoping our homeland will return. Our homeland is getting further and further from the truth. And thanks to the rest of the Arab world, who sold us now and sold us way before, who sold us in 1970 and sold us way before, who sold us, the poem you read dedicated to a king, he sold us in 1970 and left the West Bank to the Israelis behind Jamal Abdel Nasser. Let's not go down that road. I'm going to read my poem, who is going to be my upcoming book, Screaming Olives, which Naomi is editing my book. But this poem, I was going to read a different poem, but I want to read this one of how we scream and how the tree is screaming. Even the tree is tired. Beyond the evergreen, the settler is very mean. The olive tree glimpsed the oblivious coming, carrying a tank of petrol and an M16 hanging from his shoulder. The branches started waving hurriedly. Then the olives joined in, screaming like a chorus in a symphony. Call our owners, call our owners, but I wonder no one comes. Why? Is it because the soldiers are busy sniping the farmers in the harvest? The tree started yelling at the man, "Get out of my existence. Every time you come, I know I'm gone. Stop killing my babies. Stop suffocating my insides. Stop your savageness." Emmett Till lynched in 55. Way down Selma, Alabama, America South. Ali on the grill, the settler taunted. Burned in Juma, West Bank, Palestine, still in 2015. Mississippi, still. This poem is hurtful, painful. I had to write it. It tells a very, very Black history of ours. Thank you, Jackie, for having me. Sorry I got a little bit off, but I want to speak on the rest of the Palestinian poems, if I may, or elaborate a little bit. There are so many Palestinian poets, and they are born from the ashes and beyond and ever. I believe the Palestinians are the most poets in the Arab world. I'm not sure if it is, but I think it is. From our pain, the words are born. From my pain and from the martyrs that Naomi spoke about, they're our heroes. My grandmother is a martyr. My aunt, and she was not a terrorist. She was not. She was trying to save her son, and the napalm bomb dropped on her. So we write our poetry as a narrative to tell the world, listen to us. I tell people when I get on stage, I'm a human. My name is Human. Look at me. And so many others, Maya Balhaya, many others do that. But we don't deliver. Our deliverance is far beyond. I'm frustrated because I don't deliver. And people ask me, what do you want? I say deliverance. And that's why I thank you, Naomi. Not because you're my white hope, You're part of our deliverance.
Mm.
That's all I have to say. I owe you gratitude. I owe Jackie gratitude. I owe Steve Bloom. I owe George Wallace. All these gratitudes, they're our voices as well. You're our voice. Shukran, Naomi.
We're all one voice. We're the voice of light. So we just fragment into different sections, different auras and different colors and forms and shapes, but we're all part of the same light. And that's important. Thank you, Fareed. As usual, powerful and wonderful. And very moving. By the way, I'm looking at your scarf and it's wonderful. I see symbols of Palestine. Yeah, hold it below, hold below, on your white scarf. Yeah, you see, these are like birds. Suddenly I see things I've never seen before. Ah, wonderful. Great.
I got this scarf from Gaza
Do you
when me and
see the birds
Naomi.
at the bottom? Do you see the birds at the bottom? I've never seen these before. And right here, no. Where your fingers are, right here. Birds.
They're
Hundreds of
not birds.
birds.
They're lions.
I know,
There
but
were 9 lions in the desert, and Arafat explained the lions.
oh, okay.
These are our 9 lions that Arafat always wore the keffiyeh. Our keffiyeh is different than the rest of the Arab world.
Yeah, it's quite different. And these remind me of barbed wires, and also the tunnel. You know, the light at the end of the tunnel that the triangle.
That we don't see much.
Diamond, you know. Anyway, okay. Does anyone else want to read a poem? Diane, Kelvin, anybody?
Me.
Okay, thank you, Eugene. Great. Go.
The COVID shadow blues. As I walk, COVID watches my every move like a shadow that never intrudes, but is always there, watching in silence while both of us mark the passage of time. Everyone else has their own clinging COVID shadow. I see the pedestrians on the street moving along in the opposite direction, carrying shadowy appendages. Pedestrians' mouths fully covered by blue-sided masks, and some people are wearing rubber gloves. No holding hands between couples anymore. In the open, once unconsciously free, now not what it once was. Social distancing at 6 feet apart, the established norm. But I still see mothers kiss their kids, even though babies will soon enough acquire their own masks and COVID shadows pretty soon. Restaurants no longer do business indoors, but on sidewalk curbs under jerry-rigged tent tops. Silent are the cars on street curbs, with less car exhaust. The air is sweeter, easier to breathe right now. The shadows grow darker now that we're approaching winter, waiting for the next wave to come. These shadows with their scythes are ready to reap a bountiful, grim harvest. I could be out of luck the next time round, having survived the first wave. I could indeed be next to leave this confounded world of beauty and horror. Hard to tell nowadays what is normal or what is surreal. At least I led my life and met my death in New York City. No use being depressed or beset by anxiety, even though I'm afflicted by both. Everything else will take care of itself. But I'll be damned if I don't put up a good fight with my own COVID shadow. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you. That was lovely. Very moving. I know exactly how you feel. That expresses just how I feel when I walk down the street. I'd like to share with you a poem that I wrote that has relates to a painting that I did, and the painting and the poem both have the same name. It's called Ghosts of Palestine. And here's the painting. I was invited to be a part of an international symposium of artists came from around the world. And I didn't know what to paint. And when I don't know what to do, I just wet the canvas and start pouring paint. And suddenly things happen. And this was the painting. And at the top, you can see is, let me see if I can get, at the top of the painting are all these faces that started to appear. I love to do these kind of crazy abstract paintings with running water because suddenly things appear and then they show me what I'm supposed to do in the painting. So suddenly I had faces and I decided they were the ghosts of Palestine. That's what's going on. And then I did another painting of ghosts at the bottom and bombs. And this is Rachel Corey back here being bulldozed. So this is my poem that I wrote. The ghosts are there, hovering over walls and wires, checkpoints and tanks. Ghosts of prophets past, slain by the violent greedy for power and wealth. The ghosts of Isaiah, slain, sawed in half, joined Zenock, slain and stoned. The ghosts of Zechariah, killed by Herod, joined by his son, John the Baptizer. Now ghosts of martyrs slain with their sheep join Jesus, bleeding on their soil. And those who try to rescue are crushed, as Rachel protesting tanks. Ghosts of children perpetually toss bullets or flames, playing in heavenly fields. The cries of their mothers cannot reach them, but the others hear and moan in the winds at night. Ghostly sounds surround settlers' camps at midnight, bringing terror to their dreams. Israel now lives in fear of the ghosts of their God. So it's my ghost poem. And I every time I go there, I feel the ghosts around me when I go to Palestine and Jerusalem. The spirits are there. The spirits are there. I think that's why the settlers are as crazy as they are, because they know they're surrounded. So does anybody else want to read anything or have anything to say or questions for anybody? No? All right. Well, thank you all for joining. This was
just one thing. I wanted to say that, you know, if you, I spent all this time debating them on Quora for 1.5 years and I gave up, but I know how they think and this and this. Sometimes they're just bluffing. They just say things for the sake of winning the narrative. They're already loaded up with what to say and this and this and this. But when you reach, you know, I know people that have been born there as well that can't help it, that would find their way to their heart and peace if there were a conceptual framework to be able to do so. I know people that want to think that they're committing their lives to peace by learning Arabic, singing peace songs and this, but will never actually like hands-on address the situation there. And one thing that I would say is that, you know, children are being born everywhere. They're all the same. You know what I mean? When they come out into this world, I mean, I don't believe anymore that there are Jews and Arabs. I just don't. It doesn't exist. There's people. We're all accountable to what we do. But one thing I'd say is that one of the most forbidden things psychologically in this region with this heavy energy of division, and what I want to say for Naomi, is amazing that you are this voice and don't feel this, what you're saying about being like white savior or something like that. A lot of the people here are exhausted out from that elephant in the room, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and having to scratch something to eat. I'm sure that they very, 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 very much value that somebody has that voice.
Well, also, I feel like I have a privilege. I have a place like at the university where I work, I'm always speaking up for Palestine at my university, because in UK universities, it's all a question of the definition of anti-Semitism that's been imposed on the universities. So I've emailed my vice chancellor about that. I'm in contact with, I work with my union on that.
Yeah.
So, I just, like I said at the beginning, I want to work from where I am and who I am, and a ripple out from there. And that's, I think that's what any of us can do, really. Be true to ourselves, but ripple out.
Right. I want to share, I had a home health aide that was given to me by the city from coming home from the hospital that I needed help. And she was a lovely young woman from Haiti doing a master's in public health. And we had a great conversation. She told me at her college in the Bronx, Lehman College, she learned all about the Palestinian problem in a class where they had to watch videos and everything. She said she had no idea about it. So there are people who are speaking out and they are making a difference. And I think that's something to be very hopeful that, whoever would think that in a small college in the Bronx, a Haitian healthcare worker would suddenly be a very staunch proponent for Palestine. So I want to thank everybody. And we don't know how the spirit is moving. We know that good will win over evil. And we just keep hope alive and just keep doing what we're doing. And don't worry, God is going to take care of it. And next week we have Calvin, as we spoke about before, talking about Palestine before 1948, conflicting narratives. And then January 17th, Phil Hopper with Steve Bloom doing his discussion of his photographs of graffiti in Belfast and the West Bank and his comparison and study. And Bloom spent a lot of time in Belfast and he'll contribute. Then January 24th, I'm going to try to reach out to student groups. Naomi, you may know some in UK, Students for Palestine, to see, because they've been doing heroic work and a lot of them get in trouble. But there's MIT Students for Palestine just had a success in the courts. We push on, and I wish everybody a happy and healthy New Year, and with grateful heart to Naomi, to know you is an honor,
No, it's still mine.
Really. I love your poetry with its reference to architecture, because I teach architectural history. That resonated very deeply with me. I have to read your poem again. So thank you, everybody. Does anybody want to say anything else before we leave?
I do. If I may, I just want to address what Naomi is doing in England as a professor. In the US, I did a show, I recollect, back in Montclair University, and I live in Jersey. So I thought it was an honorable thing to do, but it was the bad thing to do. A professor who invited us was from Afghanistan and worked in the university for 20 some years. They gave her such a backlash. The staff, the university staff, they put pamphlets on the tables when I was doing the show about Iraq, Afghanistan, and Palestine, and there was 500 students there. The body of the student saw the pamphlet, got on stage. I said, wait a minute, we're going on. She said, not until I say what I want to say. And he said, who put the pamphlets on the table which said you are not welcomed here? And it was the staff. And they really said, we didn't do it. It was the people outside, the Montclair public. I'm like, no way. So they had a huge fight on stage and off stage. And I was so beyond. And then the professor who invited us got a huge backlash because she wanted to introduce the students to Palestine, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And I just want to say that about courage that Naomi has. In the UK, it's really not okay to talk about Palestine.
That's why I think I haven't gotten a course this year or for next semester. I think I've been blacklisted somehow at my school. Anyhow, well, we carry on anyway. So, all right, thank you.
Well, I think it was the right thing to do, Fareed, because if that's the culture there, then you challenged that culture and you stood your ground. So, and that's what absolutely, the university is the place for all to come and discuss and debate and present their views.
Especially the students, they wanted to, and they really wanted, and they kept asking, and we answered all the questions.
Yeah, I think that there is a confusion around BDS and the academic boycott, because it's taken to mean that you can't speak, for example, take a pro-Zionist stand. Well, you can say whatever you like. It depends who's paying you to be there. That's the criteria for boycott, is if you are funded by the state of Israel, because that makes you a propagandist for the state.
Absolutely.
Naomi, just while there's a chance to convey this idea, if you are in this dialogue about anti-Semitism, which is often used in a very selfish and harmful way rather than being a defense of racism, one thing that I found in those long months of discussions is actually, if you can clarify from every different aspect why anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are different things, at some point there is no common sense that can say that they are the same. There's absolutely no common sense which is based on any humanitarian aspect. So I found that quite a strong point to come forward over.
Yeah, the problem that we're having is it's the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, which has very problematic illustrative examples, one of which is to call Israel, the state of Israel, a racist endeavor, is said to be anti-Semitic in this definition. And so therefore it would be anti-Semitic to say Israel is an apartheid state. And this is already creating a chilling effect on councils here in the UK, where councils are like not letting a Palestinian bike ride, raising money for Palestine, go through, or take funds for, because the bike ride would need people from the council to manage the roads. So it's not being allowed in case, or we're going to be called anti-Semitic. And now this definition has been imposed on all the universities in the UK as of the December 31st, 2020. I think I've only heard of 2 universities that have resisted it, but the threat is that they will have all of their funding and their degree granting rights removed. So it's going to be interesting to see, what the government does in retaliation. My university, unfortunately, did not feel able to stand up to that level of pressure, and has adopted it, but have made a clarifying statement that this is not to be seen as a way of stifling any kind of criticism of Israel. But that's the kind of thing I'm engaged in, because obviously, with the union, we prefer that they would have not adopted it.
Did you hear about the guy who was a former member of Knesset who just asked Israel to declare him not a Jew anymore?
Yes, Avram Berg, yeah, that's to resist the nation state law.
Said, no, you can't. You're still a Jew. Yeah. He said, no, I don't want to be a Jew anymore.
Sorry, Sarah, I can see Sarah's got her hand up.
I taught at a SUNY college for 20 years, and it was made very, very clear. It was in a design area, but it was made very clear to me that if you wanted to get tenure, if you wanted to keep your job, you could not refer to any political references of any kind. And students would record professors and, to get them fired if they wanted to. So people were very, very careful.
If people knew how much the rigging, you can see Al Jazeera, the Electronic Intifada, the lobby and this, but the rigging of the system from behind the scenes is, they would call it out and shake it up, because it is really a very nefarious agenda. It has nothing to do with protecting those children, those Jewish children, or anything. It's a division which is profit-based intention, and power and money, but the money is just an expression of the power accumulation into a tiny number of hands using this division. The people behind the scenes, they don't even care about Jews. They don't even care about this at all. They see that it is a massive possibility of a control mechanism. And I've looked very deeply into this because I've been, discussing with some of the people that have been in different degrees, victims of this. And it's not as it's sold. That's all I would say. There's a couple of people whose research I could direct people to, but it is absolutely not the way that it's sold behind the scenes. They are laughing.
Yeah. Right, Kelvin, we have to stop because it's after our time.
Sure.
So, Sarah, did you want to say anything else?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for the program. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for everybody's.
Oh, yeah, everybody was terrific. It's very inspiring. And carry on, warriors for peace. Okay, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Have a good week.
Bye.
Happy New Year. Happy and healthy.
Exciting, Jackie.
Bye-bye.